finance end of things and stuff like that. There's some paper and pencils around. We'll answer any questions. If you could, write down your question on that piece of paper and give it to Mr. Nelson, and we'll hold off some time at the end of the working session and we'll go over them. For the most part, looks like a pretty good group here, so I don't see any flames or pitchforks or anything, at least not yet. Just keep it respectful. If all the questions end up being pretty much the same, we'll maybe just cut it short to just one or two people talking. Also, there will be more public sessions that we're planning, and in that forum, it'll be a lot more questions and answers, that sort of thing. Just being our working session and then our board meeting, we'll probably kind of keep things a little bit shorter, but we will answer some questions.
If they want to address the board, I think the forms are back there. That's normal procedure if they want to step up and...
Yep, so back there if you want to ask a question, and then when you ask the question, it'll come up and we can figure it out at the end and stuff like that. So.
Because we have quite a few people that when we stream this, listen into it, and if we're in the back
they
row
need to be coming
asking
up here.
questions, yep. They only hear part of the conversation, so I think we kind of fell back on old habits last meeting. So if you want to address the board, there's a form back there, and then we just ask that people come up to the mic so people
yep.
listening at home can hear the conversation.
And Kyle, if you need help with the writing, John can do some of that for you.
Wow. So on that note, we'll get going.
Yep.
First up.
All right.
So good evening, members of the board. My name's Matthew Hammer. I'm coming from Ellers. We're the district's financial advisor. I'm a senior municipal advisor with Ellers, and I've been working with the district for the last number of years. And we just have some information today to go over. Some of it's going to be baseline information of how your district compares. And then we'll get into some of your options as we look forward to potentially looking at ways to generate some additional revenue for operations, but then also some revenue for projects. Just high level right now, again, there's nothing in this information we're not making any determinations on this is the path forward. It's just meant to be informational at this point in time, and if there is any considerations as we move forward, then we'll fine tune some of the numbers and give more specifics at that time. So with that, I'll get started. Just over with some of this overview information. I like to always start with general tax base information for school districts, and this information is unique to the Lake of the Woods School District, but is unique to any school district in the state of Minnesota. Nobody's going to look the same in this regard. I'll orient you to this chart. The information on the left is the market value that gets assessed by the county every single year. This is the latest information we have that breaks down information by property tax base. This is for taxes payable 23. There'll be updated information for taxes payable 24 when final values and rates are released at the end of March. But for now, this is the best information we have. And you can see how your tax base makeup is made up. About 26% or almost 27% is residential homesteads. Commercial industrial makes up about 11.5. Qualifying agricultural property, that's property that would be tillable, property, managed forest land, those types of property. It makes up qualifying agricultural property. That makes up about 26.3%, and then seasonal rec makes up about 27.2%. When that gets broken down for a school district, that it gets turned into two tax bases. The tax base on the far right is called the net tax capacity tax base. That's where most school district levies are spread. The tax base in the middle is called the referendum market value tax base, and that's where there's 3 levies that the school district has at Lake of the Woods. Your operating referendum, your local optional revenue and your equity revenue. Those are the only two taxes that are spread on the middle tax base. The rest of the levies, including the school's debt service levies or all the other categorical revenues, are spread on the tax base on the right. The thing to point out is you'll see the percentage of those percentages on the right. That's the percentage of how much each portion of the tax base pays towards those levies. So on a referendum market value levy, about 54% of those levies comes through the residential homesteads, where about 23.1% of a net tax capacity comes from your residential homestead part of your tax base. And the big driver of that is, you can see the qualifying ag and the seasonal rec, which makes up about 50% of your tax base, is excluded from paying taxes on the RMV, or the referendum market value levies. And we'll see how this kind of plays out when we look at a couple of ways of generating some additional revenue for the budget as we move forward. But this just gives you some context. So most of your levies spread here, about 81%. The other 20% is spread on referendum market value. When we look at, go
I
ahead.
don't mean to,
Yeah.
tell me if it's not appropriate time for a question, but
Yeah.
you said it's all unique, it's all specific to Lake of the Woods, but when you look at the 27% on the seasonal recreational number, how does that compare to a place like Brainerd? I mean, is that just the way it is in some communities? Is that high?
Yeah, some communities that you have, obviously, just with the way your community tax base makeup, your seasonal rec property makes up a larger portion than most communities in the state of Minnesota. So that's unique to Lake of the Woods. If you get down southwest Minnesota, you'll see upwards of 70 or 80% of those tax bases are made up of ag property, for example. So when I say unique, is there's not one school district in Minnesota that's going to look the exact same in this breakdown of where the taxes come from, which makes it unique from district to district, how much the residential homeowner is going to pay compared to the seasonal rec homeowner, and so on and so forth. And we'll really see that dynamic play out in your tax base when we start looking at the difference of a levy spread on referendum market value versus net tax capacity, because the residential homeowner is going to pay a lot different. It's going to impact that residential homeowner a lot differently, because they're paying a larger majority of those referendum market value levies.
Okay.
So I think the importance, right, with you guys is when we start talking an operating referendum, for example, which we'll see as we move forward, when the seasonal rec tax base comes out, that means the residential homeowners are going to pick up more of that tax. So when we look at where you are from a tax comparison perspective right now, this is if we took a residential home at about the average of a Lake of the Woods residential home right now at about $185,000, and we stuck it into any one of these school districts on this list. And you'll see currently right now that residential home for taxes payable 23 would have paid $596 annually. And then you can see across the board, any one of those districts, if you would take that same $185,000 resident home and you put it in any one of those school districts, what you would pay.
And is that, and you may be about to say this, but okay, so that's a function of the value of the property and the number of students within the school?
This is taxes now, so this is just all school taxes. So this is a function of the tax bill that homeowner would pay. And you're right that enrollment drives how much revenue a district will generate. But from a comparison perspective on this chart, this is how much each one of these homes, or if it was valued at $185,000, would pay in any one of these communities.
Okay.
And do you have an explanation for the Goodrich anomaly?
The Goodrich anomaly, their tax base is small compared to most, right? They've got a lot of ag property, they don't have a lot of commercial property, so their overall tax base is low, but they also have an operating referendum that's closer to about $1,700 per student. And we'll see how that kind of plays out as we move forward. So this illustration right here is an illustration of what I call additional revenue for operating your school district. And when we look here, we're looking at an operating referendum and a capital project levy allowances. So all school districts are generating basic revenue through the state aid formulas. This is really looking at how much additional revenue per student do these school districts receive, or your school district receives on a per student basis above that basic revenue allowance. So currently, Kelleher doesn't have an operating referendum or a capital project levy. Lake of the Woods voter-approved operating referendum right now is not quite $24 per student. Rosa's is about $227, and then you can kind of see as you go to the right, Lancaster's at about $3,200, and they also have a capital project levy that they generate some additional revenue for. The operating referendum, the orange parts of those graphs, that revenue is used for anything in a general, anything in your general fund, so any general fund cost. Those blue bars are representing, for example, in Grigola, they use that revenue to pay for school buses and technology. Lancaster does a little bit of that as well, and then Badger uses theirs for technology costs in their school district.
Again, the fact that we're outliers in that, in terms of numbers, is that just a reflection of how long ago our last referendum was approved?
It's a function of that, and you just haven't requested operating referendum dollars or capital project referendum dollars to the levels these other districts have had voter-approved referendums approved at. So currently, right now, you're $24, and we'll talk a little bit about this as we move forward. That number, when the voters would have approved it, would have been about $300 higher on the ballot. But with the legislative change that happened in 2020, that was effective with 21, then the local optional revenue was increased by $300. No net new revenue for the school district, but it took a portion of that and moved it over towards a board-approved levy at that point in time. And we'll see how that kind of plays out as we move forward.
And you said this was per student, right?
Yep, this is per student. Yeah. And we've converted these blue bars into a per student rate. They're actually, as we look forward, it's an effective tax rate that gets applied.
Yeah.
But we've converted them to a per student basis for this representation. So this is the district's current operating referendum, and like I said, there was a law change that happened that started with fiscal year 2021. There was no net revenue gain by the school district as part of that change, but it did take a portion of that revenue and converted it over to the local optional revenue formula. So what's net effect right now, if you were out, your voter-approved operating referendum is now $24.24 per student. That legislative change, now school districts in Minnesota can approve these levies one time. They can do it at the same term and the same amount that was approved by voters one time per state law. That was a law change that happened this last legislative session and is in effect, and some school districts are accessing that. We're right here, we're just showing that time frame of when that would be applicable for your school district. And then this represents, for a voter-approved operating referendum, you can be out 1 year early from its expiration to ask for renewal, and that's what's represented in the two asterisks there. The first year would be an election in 26, and the final year would be an election in 27. So this just provides some background on that change. Again, back in November of 2016, when the voters originally would have seen the question on the ballot, or if you go back and look at a ballot question from back at that time, it would have read $324.24 per pupil. And again, that was changed. No net change in revenue. I want to make sure that's pointed out. There was no change in revenue, but it was converted over to a board-approved levy. So right now, you're generating a little bit over $10,000 per year for your voter-approved operating referendum. This provides some background on what an operating referendum can be used for. Currently, if you're not a sparsity district, and that's why you'll see the Lancaster allowance is so high, because they're a sparsity district and we're grandfathered, but if you're not a sparsity district, the cap is a little bit over $2,200 per student statewide. So for fiscal 24-25, that cap is $2,202.89. And districts can have a voter approved operating revenue above that unless you're a sparsity district. The allowance for using this revenue is pretty much wide open. You can use it for anything that you would fund out of your general fund right now. And typically there's a combination of local levy, or there historically has been a combination of local levy and state aid for operating referendums for school districts, but the valuation changes that have happened across the state of Minnesota, very few school districts receive any state aid or will receive any state aid starting with next tax year because of the increases in valuations that have happened statewide. So for the most part right now, an operating referendum is all coming through local levy. And then the max term there is 10 years. Like I said, it can be renewed once. It's spread on referendum market value tax base, and like I said, can be used for anything.
How do you pump up or get into the state aid process? You must have a real rock bottom effort on your...
Yeah, it's based on your referendum market value per student, and that formula hasn't been changed for years and years. So as the valuations have been growing statewide, for the most part, districts have lost all the state aid that have been part of that program, or will lose all the aid that's part of that program over the next year.
I mean, realistically, Lake of the Woods County is not qualified even close to do something like that, to apply for a state aid situation.
Yeah, you wouldn't qualify for state aid as part of this program. I think you have just a very tiny percentage now, and by the time we get to next year, there isn't going to be any state aid. And that really is, those benchmarks have been set in statute for a long time. They haven't been adjusted for any inflationary factors. Like some of the other formulas in the state, like the debt equalization formulas, those have been benchmarked to statewide averages now. The formulas for any of the RMV levies have not been benchmarked to any statewide factors, so they've been set. And as valuations have been growing, school districts have either lost state aid as part of the program or are not generating any new state aid if they go out and ask for new referendum revenue. So this is we prepare this chart on an annual basis for our school districts, and the legislature actually has been using this chart for quite some time too. This benchmarks the general education formula. So this is the basic education formula that you hear about whenever the legislature is talking about increasing state aid for school districts in Minnesota. The bottom represents the formula allowance, and this has been adjusted to the pupil weight change that happened back in 2015, but that represents the current pupil allowance through the end of fiscal year 25, so with the legislative changes that happened this last cycle. The top bar represents what that formula would have done if it just would have kept up with inflation. So over that period of time, you can see early back about 2 decades ago that it was closer to the blue line above, and then the gap widened. They had tightened the gap, and actually there was a lot of discussion that they were tightening the gap, but now you can see how the consumer price index has really shot up, and everybody's aware of that when you go pay for gas or pay for food, all those things, and you can see that gap now is widened again. And right now, if the formula just would have kept up to the inflationary adjustments over that period of time, the formula allowance would be about $1,300 per student higher than it is today. So if you take that $1,300 and apply it to your student count, right, that gives you a sense of how much additional revenue that would be there if the formula just would have kept up to the inflationary pressure that's been put on the school districts over that time. What that means is school districts have had to rely on asking the local property tax owners to ask for additional revenue to maintain operations and make reductions, obviously, as part of that too, and right size over time. Special education has been another big pressure that's everybody knows about over the last 2 decades. The legislature did make some improvements there, but that has still been underfunded as well. So those 2 pressure points have really caused school districts to be out asking for additional referendum revenue and either asking for additional operating referendum or asking for additional capital project levy to fund technology or other pieces of the school district's budget on an ongoing basis. So that is kind of the operating referendum side. The other area that school districts can look to generate some additional revenue is through what we call a capital project levy referendum. This is often referred to as a technology levy. And you'll hear it referred to as a technology levy oftentimes in the metro area. Currently statewide, I think the last number that I saw was 58 school districts across the state have some form of capital project levy that's currently funding either technology or some capital purchases in the way of school buses or other deferred maintenance types things. This is a little different because the ballot question is not a per pupil amount. It's actually presented as a tax rate that's put on the ballot. The allowable uses really reside when you're thinking about generating additional revenue for your operation. It's ways at looking at what are you currently funding out of your general fund, such as technology or other capital purchases that would free up other resources in your budget. So that's the way we've been looking at this as a means to generate revenue for a school district is what are you funding out of your general fund currently that could be funded with the capital project levy in the way of technology or other capital purchases. And when we speak technology, it's not limited to just devices. That can be technology staff, that can be people that are working on your networks, that can be training that happens, that can be digital curriculum. So technology is very broad when you think of technology in the way of utilizing this revenue. The other area is vehicle purchases. Oftentimes school districts will have buses or those types of things. That's another thing that school districts are using this revenue stream for. There is no state aid component to this, albeit, like I said before, the operating referendum isn't really generating any state aid for school districts for the most part anymore either. The term is still 10 years, and unlike the operating referendum, this one does not fit into the part of the statute that allows for boards to renew this one time. So this has a max term of 10 years, and if at that point in time it expires, the board would have an opportunity to present it back as a renewal, but it would expire and wouldn't be able to be board approved. So the other major difference here is this is going to be spread on your net tax capacity tax base. So when we think of that, and we'll see how that kind of rolls out from a comparison perspective in the upcoming slides, but it's going to be spread like most of your school levies and going to pick up your entire tax base and not exempt the ag land as well as the seasonal rec property.
Is that historically or traditionally applied in conjunction with a regular operating referendum? Or is that something alternatively, or do you post 2 on the ballot and hope they pick one? How does that apply?
It's been done different ways. The questions they can't be presented in the same question. And they can't be presented in the same question because they're spread on 2 different tax bases. So by law, they have to be presented separately. It's not uncommon for them to be presented as 2 separate questions as part of a referendum ask. And then they obviously can be presented on their own as well. But when you're looking at presenting this information, oftentimes as you look at it, your budget might not have enough cost to be able to get moved over to meet the needs of additional revenue. So in that case, sometimes districts will present a question that will have a capital project levy component and an operating referendum component. And then they'll obviously be taxed a little bit differently, which, but you'll see that when it's presented, where they'll see the tax impact for both questions presented as part of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I'm thinking from a voter perspective, but does that get confusing? Is the general public savvy enough to make that discernment of the two and how it's going to affect their tax base, as opposed to just, they're asking for 2 referendums as opposed to 1?
Yeah.
I mean, you
and
just
those
went
are
on at length to describe it, and I don't think, and the average...
Yeah, and those are all considerations, right, of like, of how it gets presented. I think when it gets presented from a tax impact perspective, we try to make it as clear as possible, right, that you're going to see the tax impact for question 1, tax impact question 2, and the net change of both, right, presented in that information. So with that said, it for surely is, when you have more than one question out there, there's obviously more information that has to be presented on the reasons for each of them. So this chart right here is really meant to provide the overall differences between the 2 types of levies. And like I said, I've hit on all of these. I think the main ones to take away is they're 2 different tax bases. One's a per pupil amount, one's going to be a tax rate. There's no maximum here on a capital project levy, albeit that if you're looking to generate additional revenue for operations, there is basically a maximum in essence if that's your goal, right? Because you're only going to have so many costs that are going to qualify for a capital project levy, where this is going to be pretty much open-ended and you're going to be able to use this revenue for whatever you would like. The election dates for any net tax capacity levy, there's actually more dates that you can present this to voters. You can present a capital project levy or a bond referendum in February, April, May, August, and November of each year. And an operating referendum can only be presented in November unless you do it via mail ballot, which typically is very costly, and then or unless you're in SOD. That's the other factor. If you're in SOD, you can present it outside of November. And the max term is 10 years. So this is really kind of, the goal of this chart, we call this our smackdown, which really looks at these 2 types of ways of generating revenue. And if we look at generating an additional $300,000 of revenue, if we do it through a capital project levy and we do it through an operating referendum, you can see the breakdown of how the taxes are paid. So the top is your residential homesteads. If we look at a $175,000 home, for example, we're at about $54 a year. These are annual tax impacts versus $134 a year for an operating referendum, and the difference is about $80. You can see how that plays down on the commercial property. If we look at a $100,000 commercial property, it's about 57 on a capital project levy, about 77 on an operating referendum. And then you can see how it plays out with ag property and seasonal rec, because there are no taxes paid when we start looking at an operating referendum on these tax bases, where there is taxes paid for a capital project levy. And like I said, this is where most of your taxes are spread. The difference really comes into play for districts is when they're asking for operating referendum dollars. This is the one of the few levies that are spread on operating or the referendum market value tax base. So are there any questions on this piece? Because I think this is kind of an important consideration when you look at the 2 types of levies.
I like the idea that everybody is contributing on the capital project levy. I mean, it seems to certainly makes it a more saleable item.
Yeah, I will say when we worked with Walker, this was an analysis we did. Walker has a lot of seasonal rec property. It's almost 40%. And we did the same analysis, right? When you start looking at that portion of your tax base starting to contribute, and it takes some of that burden off the residential homeowner.
And what do they have for agricultural?
They don't have a lot of agricultural there. Yeah.
But maybe quite a bit commercial.
They have a little bit more commercial, right? So this was meant to just give you some context on, these are really the two areas that school districts have a means to generate additional revenue for operations. So it either comes through a capital project levy or an operating referendum are the two ways when you're looking at generating additional revenue for your general fund that school districts are able to do it in the state of Minnesota per statute. So the next piece of information we just have to summarize is just some tools overall when we start looking at broader projects outside of just generating our additional revenue. These are the main ones. These are the voter approved tools, right? And we'll look at the main voter approved tools. The main one for capital projects is a school building bond issue or a referendum. Your district's done that in the past. That's has the broadest authority, most flexibility. If it's on the ballot and you're acquiring and bettering facilities, you pretty much can use a school building bond election and make improvements to your schools. Operating referendum, capital project levy we talked about. Those are typically more on the operation side than the capital project side, but you can use those dollars too because they're open enough to that if that's what you're looking to do. So currently the district has outstanding debt that goes out through 2036. This is just to give you a sense of kind of where you're at to date. The 2016 A bonds, the final maturity is fiscal 27. A portion of that as we go forward is you use some of your existing revenues to make those payments. We'll see that in the upcoming slides how that works. And then the other portion was a school building bond that was refunded at the same time those bonds were issued. And those payments are scheduled to expire at the end of fiscal year 27. This is the larger issue right here. This bond was refunded. It was actually capital appreciation bonds, and it was refunded back in 2021, and there was a considerable amount of tax savings that was generated at that time, and I don't have it off the top of my head, and I should have, but I was thinking it was in the tune of, I know it was multi-millions of dollars, and I can look that up, and I should have had that information. I'm sorry about that. When we start looking at ways that school districts can look at additional projects, when you look at financing, it's not similar to, it's similar in the way that you have principal and interest payments that are made over time, just like a home mortgage, but municipalities have some broader flexibility with how they structure the commitments and the repayment. And this is really just to give you an illustration of hypothetically if there was a $7 million bond and how it would get repaid over time. The gray bars here represent the district's existing commitments. Those are your existing debt service levies. And these really represent the tax rates, and I'll talk a little bit about this change here and the reason for it. But the gray bars represent your existing tax rates. The blue bars represent what the payments could look like for a new bond issue. And really what this looks like is when we look at capital improvements, a portion of this is managing the tax levy and the tax burden on the homeowners and the property owners in the school district and trying to spread that over what would be a useful life of an asset. In this case, we're looking at 18 tax levies, but that allows as those assets are being, their useful lives are being used up, the taxes are getting paid over a period of time. It also allows to spread out that tax burden as the property owners that are benefiting from facilities or utilizing the facilities are repaying those over a period of time. So really this is kind of twofold, right? We're trying to manage the tax implication, but also spread that out so that you're not paying all those levies right up front and having a large tax burden in the short term. This represents the tax rates, and everybody is fully aware that the valuations have went up a lot over the last number of years from market values, and I think one of the important considerations for school districts It doesn't always work this way in other municipalities, but for school districts in Minnesota, you're generating revenue on a per student basis, or you're generating it on a fixed debt service levy, because we're setting up those levies when we set them up to be level over a period of time. You can see there's a little drop here. But this really is a representation of the valuation change that is reflective in the tax rate actually decreasing to collect that same amount of revenue. So for example, right, if you have a $500,000 principal and interest payment, that principal payment's going to stay level over time because we've set up your structure to be a level over a period of time. But as the valuations grow, that means the tax rates to collect that same $500,000 go down. And I think that's important for people to be aware of, because oftentimes other states will use what we call a mill rate, where you'll have an effective tax rate and that revenue comes in and actually means that a school district or their municipalities will receive more revenue. That's not the way it works in Minnesota. You receive a fixed amount of revenue to make those payments, and then those tax rates are adjusted to collect that revenue. And then the other levies that you have are collected based on your student enrollment. So as your student enrollment is ebbing and flowing, that's how revenues for your most part of your operation is going to be collected. The revenue is going to be collected. I think the important piece just to point out, and you'll see it as we start looking at the tax impact, right, is this is mitigating the tax implications, and we're doing that by spreading that out over a period of years. So when we look at generating $7 million, this is the estimate for what that would look like. If we take a $175,000 home, in this case, it's about $67 per year to generate about $7 million for, and that would be a $67 increase over that period of time and repaid over that period of time. So it would go up one time at $67, and then taxes would remain at that level ongoing. And then you can see how this breaks out. I think the other consideration here is any levy that's a school building bond qualifies for the ag to school credit. So you'll see in this case the ag property tax impacts. This does account for that 70% reduction in the debt service as a result of the ag to school credit that is applied in this case. And then you can see the seasonal tax impacts here. So I'll just touch on the ag credit a little bit. The ag credit started back in 2017. It was initially implemented with taxes payable 2018, and it was at 40% credit, and it applies to any debt service levy the school district has. So anything that ends up in the debt service fund, so including your existing debt that we showed here, all these levies are currently qualifying and getting that credit as reduced as part of that law. It stayed at 40% through 2019, and then it's been phased up. It's phased up to 50% in 20, 55% in 21, 60% in 22, and then now is at 70% in 23, and that's at its full level. And it's been there since started with taxes payable 23, and again in 24 and ongoing. It's an open and outstanding appropriation, which means that even if the government shuts down, it would still be flowing, right? And the only trajectory that has had is one of the few laws in the state of Minnesota that has had bipartisan support. So the only trajectory that has been talked about has been an increase to the credit. Back in, would have been not last summer, but the summer before, there was a bill to go to 85%. And that didn't ultimately come through. And then last year there wasn't a lot of discussion on the ag credit, but it's at 70%. So anyway, for the ag property owners, the levies that are getting applied here have that 70% credit automatically applied off their taxes. There's nothing that you have to apply for, it just automatically happens at the county level. So when we start looking at other options, when we look at the information that, I know you've had some information prepared by Winstead from the standpoint of cost. There are other avenues where school districts look to generate some additional revenue for capital projects that are board approved. Your LTFM program, or long-term facilities maintenance program revenue, that's one of the most common areas school districts generate some additional revenue. Your district did use that. If you go back to that 2016 A-bond, a portion of that was funding some projects at that time. That revenue is limited to $380 per student if your building age is at its full level. If you're not at 35 years of age, there's a prorated factor of how much revenue you receive on an ongoing basis. And we'll see how that kind of plays out. I got a little chart that shows that as we move forward. The other area that school districts can generate some revenue is for projects that by state statute are considered, the state statute is considered necessary. HVAC improvements that improve indoor air quality that are over $100,000 per site, fire suppression, and asbestos removal are those areas. But for the most part, with districts with newer facilities, those don't typically apply. This is just kind of touching on that 2016A facilities maintenance bond. This is a graphical illustration of how that's been working. You can see your revenue as your building age is increasing. You get just a little bit more revenue on an ongoing basis each year. And you're going to get to your full level of funding when we get out to 2029. Right now is the projection. This is the fiscal year. But the orange bars represents your current payments, and that final payment then is going to come off with fiscal year 27. Right now you're receiving right around that $160,000 a year number for facility or deferred maintenance projects in the district. And about $100,000 or so is available right now because a portion of that's going towards making payments on that other bond. I won't touch a lot on these. The operating capital facilities bond is another area that school districts generate some revenue. That's the same concept where you're using the revenue that you generate through your operating capital formula to repay those payments. This has broader authority, however, though, so if you're looking at renovation projects, that's an area that you can look at using capital facilities bonds for, and capital notes is the other one. This one, oftentimes, school districts are leasing buses, for example, or purchasing buses with capital notes or technology. That's the other way school districts are using operating capital, or operating capital through capital facilities bonds. When we look at lease purchase financing, this is the lease levy. You guys are currently using your lease levy for your ice arena lease. Right now, districts receive $212 per student, and there is some things where districts can look at doing building additions or making improvements to outdoor facilities. For example, fields, tracks, tennis courts are maintained in this way sometimes through lease versus financing for the lease levy. Currently, you're using up most of your lease levy authority with that existing lease for the ice arena, so that's already in place for your school district. And then the final area that school districts have, you might have heard economic tax abatement before. It's common in other municipalities and cities and counties, but for school districts it's limited. School districts can use it for parking lot projects or parking lot infrastructure only. It is an additional tax levy, but school districts in Minnesota now have been using this funding mechanisms to make improvements or build new parking lots when they're needed. But it is an additional tax levy. It does qualify for the aid credit, and that it can include bus turnarounds, those types of things, anything parking related. And really the idea is those are public purpose spaces. So that's the use that's been approved by MDE for school districts to use. So that's what I had really high level. I can answer any questions folks have about any of the information or anything that you're kind of thinking about at this point in time.
I mean, other than the specifics of what we decide to move forward with, from a knee-jerk reaction, do you look at that public commitment that we have right now and say we're overdue for asking something like this? I mean, it's time.
Yeah, I mean, you look at your tax comparison, right, you're one of the lower, you have some of the lower residential taxes in the area. I don't know if that means you're overdue, but when you have some needs, right, that's an argument for it.
Well, I guess what I was thinking was the age of the building is some of the things that precipitate, like the need for a capital referendum. Is it nearing 30 years or is it 30 years?
1992,
Yep.
So that's over 30.
so 20,
It's over 30.
30, yeah,
32 years.
32 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's obviously a consideration, right? When you start talking useful life of assets and when they're getting to that point, when there's needs that come due. I think from an operating perspective side, that's the reason why some of the other communities have a little higher taxes, school taxes, right, is because they're generating additional operating referendum dollars for their operations to run programs too. So when you look at where you're at on this list, when I go back here, right, this correlation to where you are at on this list with the comparables to this list of what's getting generated for additional operations for the school really is correlated because these school districts are generating on a per student basis more revenue for their operations than your school district is, which is a direct correlation to why your taxes are low on the residential side here.
And then on a frequency term, you know, your chart there where the CPI was starting to diverge and, yes. I mean, realistically, a lot of schools looking at that and probably throwing referendums out in 2013, that time. I mean, they're aware of that, see that happening and say, okay, and we have not done that. I mean, we didn't in 2013, obviously, and but moving forward, should we be looking at that more frequently or at least prepare the taxpayers for that possibility? I mean, it
Yeah.
seems to be that that's just a fact of life right there.
Yeah, and I can say, like anecdotally, right now, there's a lot of school districts looking at referendums right now, just with inflationary pressures that have happened for various reasons, right? With revenue loss or other things that are happening just economically that are putting increased pressure on operations. I will say that one way that school districts are combating a little bit of this inflationary pressure is you can have an inflationary adjustment in your operating levy question. And that's becoming far more common now, where school districts will not just ask for a per pupil amount, they'll also ask for a per pupil amount that's subject to a rate of inflation. And that rate of inflation is determined in the same way this rate is done. This MD, it's not that the school district determines that. The MDE determines that on an annual basis when they determine their statutory cap movement. So the RAPs, or as this statutory cap moves here, this number, because this moves on an annual basis, then those operating referendums that have that inflationary adjustment move at that same level.
So that would be an ongoing improvement.
I mean, for the
Yeah.
10 years of the bond or whatever.
Yeah, so like, for example, if you ask for $100 increase per student, the second year of that would be whatever that inflationary adjustment was, which had historically been about 2% over the last decade, except for the last few years where it's been a lot higher than that, just with how inflation has been impacting the economy. So those numbers have been much higher than that for the districts that have that inflationary adjustment. The other way to look at it is this type of levy this is one levy for a school district that is subject to the change in property valuation. So a capital project levy will generate additional revenue as the tax base changes in value, either decreases or increases, right? There has been times where probably 15 years ago where valuations were declining, right? So then districts that had capital projects levy actually lost revenue on an ongoing basis, but for the most part, districts generate a little bit more revenue on an ongoing basis with the tax rate levy, and that generates increased revenue each year as the tax base grows. So at times, it can be beneficial to have both of them, right? So that kind of gets back to your question, because one will adjust based on tax base and one will generate enrollment. I think the other consideration, if you're declining enrollment, declining enrollment can have some benefit to have that inflationary factor, because that can offset some of the effects of the decline too that districts are experiencing. So having that inflationary effect, right, kind of just helps offset some of that decline in enrollment too.
I mean, you look at our financial picture, and you're aware of the fact we're working hard on things right now, but I would argue that the declining enrollment hasn't, I mean, it's not been good over the last decade, but it seems to have hopefully stagnated a little bit in terms of that drop. So we're trying to fix, or we're trying to fix a building, for instance, with program dollars, you know, is sort of the way I look at it at the moment. So your argument earlier was the capital levy would allow you to open up some of those program dollars to use them where they should be. You know,
Right.
so that you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of a mentality.
Yeah, I think some of the big areas, if you're thinking of capital project levy, your technology obviously is a big cost that comes out of your general fund operation. Curriculum is another one. I think that has had a big evolution. It used to be textbooks, right, that you used over and over and over again. Well, that isn't the way it works anymore. Subscriptions, those types of things that have ongoing costs. So there's just cost to having those digital curriculum offerings. That's another area that you can use your capital project levy to dedicate funds towards that. And then if you have a vehicle fleet, that can have some impact, right? Because you have to budget that into your operation on an ongoing basis. But I think when you think of technology, it's very broad, right? That can mean training that gets done with staff. That can mean just maintaining infrastructure in your school district. That can mean devices. That's a very broad spectrum, and those types of things come with a cost. And if you don't have a dedicated funding mechanism to do that, then it ultimately comes out of your general fund. And puts stress on what you're saying, other programs, right?
Yeah. From a timing perspective, again, my assumption is that you're sort of walking us through this now, but we'll continue to, assuming we want to move forward with something like this, walk us through to, let's say, November, if we pick that for a date.
Yeah.
Is that timing appropriate for what we're talking in late February for a November potential at this point? I mean, I understand that there are dates, right, Jeff, that August, for instance, if we really ramrodded some stuff through here. Or,
Yeah, August would be tight at this point in time. You have to call for an election 74 days in advance. So if you're talking November, the election deadline is around August 25th, I think. I can't remember the exact date, but it's around that time frame, the end of August. And typically, boards would be calling for that election either at their August meeting or their July meeting. And obviously, there's pieces in front of that determining what the ask is and all those types of things that go into that timeline as well. But that's the statutory timeline. So August is kind of your drop dead date. If there is, with the capital project levy, the other consideration, if you're spending a dime outside of technology, there is a review and comment. If you're going to generate more than $2 million over the period of 10 years, that just means that submission, it's a very abbreviated review and comment, has to be submitted by the end of June. But that's nothing from the standpoint of if that's a consideration where you should be worried about that in any means.
And then, but if we don't get this on November, the next potential date falls into the next calendar year, which then, I mean, I understand that this is, we're not seeing dollars till 2026, even if something is successful in
That's
November.
correct.
So now we're looking at 2027 if we don't make a November date on this.
Yeah, so an election in *24 will be taxes paid in '25, which will be revenue in fiscal '25-26. If an election is held in *25, the revenue is collected with taxes payable '26, and then it's revenue in '26-27. So if there is an election held in November, the first year revenue then pushes out a year to your point. And right now, the first year of new revenue on any scenario, the earliest that it could be generated would be with fiscal '25-26.
Is there typically a cost associated, I mean, other than promotion, I would assume there's a fairly hefty lift is just to get the word out, and then thinking cost associated and then risk of not having it approved, because like 50% of them approximately.
Yeah, it's a 50+1, yeah, or so you have to.
First try.
Yeah, and I think right now, there's going to be some cost share because you're going to have the national election going on too, right?
Okay.
So if you're typically that's some cost savings when a district's running it because they're running them at the same time. So the election's going on regardless if you're on the ballot or not, right?
So that would be a reason to push for it this year.
Well, it'd be a reason that it's, from the standpoint is it's not going to be as costly, right, this year.
What's costly? I mean, what, town this size, what does it cost to put something like this?
I don't have specific numbers on that, on what that would be, but you're going to have legal fees for generating the election documents and those types of things.
And that's something we'll be able to find out, obviously,
Yeah.
as we enter into this. I mean, I'd like to know, is it going to cost me, for us, this much to fail, for instance? You know, and knowing that, you know, that potential exists out there.
12 to 14,000 sticks in my mind last time we talked about it, but I don't remember that.
That sounds about right.
Say that again, I
12 to
didn't.
14,000
Okay.
for the district. I'm
I mean, that,
pretty sure that was a November election,
In the
so,
regular.
does that include Eller's costs?
no. I think that was just to pay the county for running the ballots.
Yeah, and
all
typically
that
our
stuff.
cost just is about $2,500 for helping prepare tax impacts and all those pieces, depending on what we're doing per election type, so.
So it's not something you want to go into unprepared for without a plan, because there is a significant amount of money, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and those are costs that unfortunately you just can't avoid, right? So from the standpoint of if you're going to have a ballot question, so.
And I think whether or not you're prepared or not,
Do you give advice, or do you, the $2,500 just is basically making sure things are done properly?
We facilitate all the election, we prepare all the tax numbers, right, all the tax impacts, all those pieces. We'll come up with all the analysis for taxes. We prepare a website typically that gets prepared and gets put on the website so property owners know exactly what the tax implications are for the questions.
Well, I mean, I'm leading that into the question that I'm going to ask for advice, which is, you've looked at this, you know, you've got a smell on it, you've certainly done these before. Is that something Lake of the Woods should be pushing into right now? I mean, I look at that and say, God, we need to pump that up a little bit. It seems almost egregious that we're not higher in terms of what we're asking out of the public. Now, that's a little dangerous to sit here with an elected board position and say something like that, but it just seems like it's an appropriate time, just from what you've just thrown at us.
Yeah, I think the considerations, right, are if you know you're going to need additional revenue for your operation, right? You're not going to generate any revenue until 26 the way it is, right? So the question becomes, can you wait longer, right? Because then the new revenue wouldn't be coming till 27. So I think that's an important consideration as you're thinking about it. And then it becomes just budgetary from the standpoint of how you think your operation, from the standpoint of needing additional revenue is. And I think the numbers are there, right? When we go back and we look at what, I just go back to here because I think this is an important thing. When I look at these, is I say, this is additional revenue on a per student basis that these districts have for running their school districts and providing programs that you don't have, right? So that's helping support their operations and the programs that the public sees on a daily basis. If you had another $300,000 per kid, that probably would make some difference, right, from the standpoint of maintaining programs and maintaining high-quality staff, all those things that are important to making sure that kids learn. And then I think this is a testament to a correlation of this, right? And that taxes are lower here, just There's various reasons for that, but a component of that is because of the lower per student operating referendums.
And if we looked at that last chart that you just threw up there with the other school districts, you could probably look at dates on that, and they would also be somewhat sequential in terms of the way they've ascended the ladder, but that the right-hand side of that would be the most recent of referendum askings, and back down to this end, we're probably on the far end of the date, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, and this Goodridge one doesn't even have the latest election in there yet.
Do you want to open it up for any questions from the public? I know we're going to wait till the end, but with the weather coming in and Matt's got to get somewhere sooner than later.
One more question, when would a decision have to be made? I mean, what are you looking at now? I mean, are we talking within the next 30 days of saying we're going to move forward with that?
From what he said, it's
I mean-
sooner rather than later.
I mean, I think an indication of kind of conceptual direction, right? Ultimately, your deadline's going to be August, right? Of whether
Yeah.
it's go
And then back into that.
or not, but,
And if we're looking at capital, then we have to have some good information by June. You know.
so there's just some considerations as you're kind of doing your planning from that perspective, and it's whether it's just operating question or whether there's potentially other considerations for asking for capital projects too. And any other analysis, because, I mean, we've showed you this, right?
Right.
So I think there's, depending on what you guys are thinking for specifics, that'll kind of play into, we'll have to kind of work through that analysis on our end to provide you the information you need for making a decision too.
Do you target like, I guess it depends on how you go about it, but would you target like a $300 per pupil? That seemed to be kind of the average over there. I mean, that works out to roughly $120,000-ish for us per year. Or would you go about it some other way, or what do you use?
Well, I think the important thing is to kind of look at your budget, right? And what you think you need from a budget perspective. And I know you guys are kind of working through those specifics yet, so those can get fine-tuned. And that's kind of your initial basis of what do you need from a budgetary perspective as you go forward, and then is there additional requests on top of that that would get you some other things from a school district perspective or other programs that you could support as well. So those are things that we can look at, right, based on after we kind of look at other specifics, and we kind of work with Jeff to kind of fine-tune those potential requests that you'd have for looking at other options.
Breach protocol and open it up to the general public. If you have any questions for them, now's the time to ask them if anyone wants to. Woody's got one.
I've got a question. Is this briefing available online? Does somebody can see?
This year? Yeah, we can put it up on the website.
A nice presentation would do it help.
Yeah.
It-
You
it
can
sh- it
have
will
mine,
be.
I'll
It's
get
in the
Boyd, I'll get a
forecast.
copy of Boyd's if you want.
Okay, I'll take it out. It just help when I write the article.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it to you here before the
Okay,
meeting.
that's the fact.
Why don't we save time and just give them mine?
Okay, fair enough.
I have a question. Do the recent non-passing of referendums in places like Warroad and Thief River, in the last two, last year was, Thief River was last year and Warroad was, I think, 2 years ago. Should that impact your decision to approach this? Is that a pattern in this area?
I'll say that every district is different, right? Because you'll see Goodridge's taxes were high, right, and they passed a referendum last cycle. So I think every community, depending on where they're at for various reasons, is different when you're presenting information and what you're discussing from the standpoint of what programs and those types of things are the important piece that resonate with whoever you're putting them out to. So I wouldn't say that should be any deterrent to whether you should ask or not.
Did Ellers work on either of those two referendums?
Did not work on Thief River and did not work on Warroad.
I'll throw something out, that, at least from what I noticed on that. They already have in place referendums, and we're at $24. So
Right.
I would hope we would have a bit of leeway with the public.
But I do think that I asked that question because I know Warroad went through major cuts,
Yep.
and Thief River is doing major cuts because referendums did not pass. So it's, I think, quite local
Oh, yeah.
to us,
Yep.
you know.
Okay, go ahead.
We will specify a little bit more depth with the age of the school, when we got to that part, talking over reaching maturity level of whatever you want to call a sense of being done with our debt to, what, you said 35 years, I believe you said? And we're reaching.
Yeah, so one of the formulas, and I'll spend a little bit more time on this because I think it's it's important for especially outstate schools, because so school districts in the metropolitan area have been grandfathered forever, and they don't have to ask voters to do any maintenance on their schools. They can levy for whatever they want. If you're in the biggest, it's now 28 schools based on a square footage perspective. So it's, if your buildings are more than 30 or more than 35 years old, the limitation is 1,500 or 1,500 square feet, and if it's 15, it's 1,850, I think is the calc. And then they get a levy for any deferred maintenance costs. Historically, school districts in like outstate that didn't fit that meld were limited to a very small deferred maintenance allocation that came about. And starting in 2015, the LTFM program came into play, and it started generating some actual revenue for school districts to use towards facilities. And I say that because there's a backlog for school districts right out the state and across the state that do deferred maintenance projects. So if you're an outstate school, oftentimes you're asking to repair a roof or to do windows. You won't see that very often in the metro. You'll see it for a new field house or some other new program, right? Because they're just not having to ask those questions for just maintenance. With that law change, that was a dedicated funding source. It's 300, it phased up, it wasn't at that level, it's now at 380 per student, but you have to have your building age on average for all your sites has to be at least 35 age, otherwise you get a prorated factor of that revenue. So if you go build a brand new high school, for example, brand new one site, when that high school comes online and if the other school is sold or demolished or gotten rid of, you don't get any deferred maintenance or maintenance revenue in the short term, as those costs are, as the building is aging up. And then when you get to 35 years, you get that full allocation. So when I was saying on that revenue stream, right, if we look at that, this revenue stream is really showing that your district's going to reach that full 35 years of age, getting out here in starting with fiscal 28.
So the reason why I'm asking, where I'm going with it, is that you're bringing up 2026, if we get things situated here, if not 2027, the projected date that you could receive funding, but yet so we have options to go elsewhere for more funding if our schools.
Yeah, this is just funding. You get about $100,000 a year the district gives just to maintain facilities that's dedicated for maintenance. Otherwise, the revenue stream has to come through other general fund revenues, either through operating capital or the general fund. This, the current project for the district's outstanding debt here, this is the payments that are going towards the other major capital projects in those gray bars. And those payments go out through taxes payable 35 right now. And the district's done a good job. They've managed and refinanced those obligations when rates were good. So there was a considerable amount of tax savings that happened back in 2021 during that refinancing that happened at that point in time. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to see where it's crossing.
Yeah.
Get a tight point, so.
Yeah, so this represents tax rates on the capital levies, right?
I just wanted to hear
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
and so other people listening can understand it.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. Let us know if you have any other questions, and Jeff can get in touch with us, okay? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. We'll be in touch.
All right, I think we'll move on to board committee reports. Forest?
School forest, we did our,
School forest?
I don't have we did our candlelight ski, but we didn't ski, and we didn't have candlelight. Otherwise, it was a very successful event. It was 48 degrees. We did use the new loafing shed for the first time, I think officially. I had the DNR set up a, touch and feel kind of a situation out there. We had fires at both spots, good turnout, 50, 60 people, hot dogs, marshmallows. The only thing lacking was no Jeff Burcham to tell stories about the out of doors. So it was a good event.
Okay, then I guess, I had them written down here. What were the other committees?
Buildings and grounds, and I can address that in my...
Okay, we'll postpone that. Finance?
Sheena usually does that
Yeah, we'll let
in the
hers,
finance
okay.
report.
Well, in that case, all the other ones are covered, so we'll move right along. We'll go right into the superintendent's report.
So I see we're already after our start for the regular board meeting, so I'll try
Yeah.
to summarize. I have a ton of stuff to go through. I'll try to go through it as thoroughly as I can, but also keep time in mind. I guess the first thing I want to just do a clarification. I know in the newspaper, the headline, school board facing shortfall takes out a loan to meet payroll obligation. I just want to assure everyone that we have not taken out a loan. We have not established a need. We were able to meet payroll at this time. So the headline was a little misleading, and I know the Northern Light region is looking at a retraction that I requested. Our enrollment, you might have to turn those back off, Sam, because I have some stuff, so. It's all right. Enrollment, we're at 429, and that's down 2 from our January report. Elementary is still at 201 students. And then our senior high school, junior high, including the 6th grade, is at 228. We had a district cabinet committee meeting, and I just want to give a kind of a summary of that, and kind of go into some of the details. The purpose of that meeting was to go with staff and discuss where we're at financially and come up with or present some recommendations for reductions. We met on February 21st. There were 17 staff and 2 school board members present. We did an overview of changes in revenues and student enrollment that has led to the need to make reductions. And I just want to quickly hit, there's 2 things that are going on financially with the district. Declining enrollment and the term funding cliff has been used in some articles. That's one thing that's pushing us to have to make specific reductions, and those reductions would be something that we'd have to approach at this time either way. The other issue, I'm going to call it missteps or financial hits, unforced errors that hit our fund balance, our unassigned fund balance, which tighten things up for us and makes things a little more stressful for everyone, and that's kind of the reason why we had to take out that line of credit. And looking at where we're at, a lot of this stuff came about during the 21-22 school year. It probably started a little bit before that. But we had a lot of staff changes within the business office. In September 27 of 2021, we transitioned from a full-time in-house business manager and entered into a contract with SMS, with a business manager in the building 20 hours per week. We did have a designated HR person that had been there. October 11th, she resigned, so we came in with a new HR person coming into that position in November. And then on May 23rd, we transitioned with SMS to a new business manager person. That's when we brought Sheena Brandt in, and she replaced the previous business manager. In the shift with all that, I think there was some missteps that kind of led to a few other things down the line. During that school years where we had the county check for the line that was not accounted for, which overstated our revenue, and it was not caught by the auditors at that time. So that was something, was actually repaying the state for that extra almost $500,000 this last fiscal year, and that contributed to a hit to our unassigned account. We also, during that time frame, had several employees that left the district and were not correctly terminated in the HR office, and this led to the insurance premiums being paid over time that shouldn't have been paid. We also had lots of federal ESSER dollars. We had designated some of those dollars for our chiller replacement, and the report that was supposed to be submitted to MDE was not submitted when it needed to be. Also during this time, there was some errors with salaries being under budgeted, and that started in FY21. Previous auditors, the one that we had this last year and the one before, were both extremely late in getting our budget and our final audit report, which is what we use to make adjustments to update our budget. And this impacted what we had in our 5-year projection model, which led us to not make the budget reductions we should have last year. I feel throughout all of these things that I've listed, I think we've been I feel Sheena and I have been very up forward and forthcoming with this information. When these things were caught, we brought it to the board's attention. We did it at public board meetings. So this isn't something that we've been trying to hide. When we messed up and we found it, we brought it to your attention, and we did it at a public meeting. At the last meeting, Todd Natsky did take the bulk of the blame when asked for staffing and budgeting errors. I also take responsibility for not catching some of these things sooner, and that's part of what I'm supposed to be doing. And we'll be looking at ways to improve how we, our oversight for the business and HR. We've been doing, since I took over this position, monthly finance meetings. We need to look at how we share that information so that we can catch these types of things before they get out of hand. So those are kind of the missteps that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. Declining enrollment, and this is one of the slides that Matt actually used in his presentation, that talks about the lack of the state keeping up with inflation. The next slide I have is, and this is from our audit report, most recent one, our revenues per student for 2023 is at $15,421, and this is about $1,800 less than what our actual expenditure per student is, and that's on this next slide. which is at 1,700, or 17,232. So our revenues are not keeping pace on our per student expenses. This is also from the audit, and this is our WADMs, or our pupil units. And a lot of time when I give my report, that's in just a head count. This is the weighted, and it talks about how each student is weighted above. The pencil marks in there, those are my numbers, and it's just for demonstration purposes only, but I wanted to put that up there so you get kind of a feel for, with a small district, what the changes can be with enrollment, whether it's going up or down. You know, you can see in 2019, we're up 11 kids. I just used 15,000 as a rough number that we get for revenue. You know, we increased $165,000 that year. The next year, we had a small kindergarten class, big senior class. We had 43 fewer kids. That's a $645,000 hit on the district in 1 year. The next year, we're up 17. You know, we're at plus 255,000. In FY '23, we're down 16. That's down 240,000. Net over since 2019, the net is down 31 students, $465,000. Now, this is just demonstration. The state does provide a buffer. We have a decline in enrollment, and it's a formula that helps, especially small districts with decline in enrollment. It kind of gives us a little more aid over a limited time to just kind of buffer the decline in revenue. So the need to make significant reductions is not a new development. I just did some quick research and going back to previous board meetings. As far as back as 2019, 2020, at our May 28th school board meeting, we did quite a bit of look at declining enrollment and making some reductions. I'd be happy to share that with the board again. You know, so back then we were looking at these numbers and we knew that we needed to make some reductions, and we did some of those that year. Last March, we were sitting here on March 6th, the special board meeting, where we had to make some tough decisions and some reductions. And in that meeting, I said this is only the start of it. We need to make more reductions as we move forward. General fund expenditures, this is something I shared with the group. Our classroom instruction makes up about 74% of all the expenditures, and that's the regular instruction, vocational, special ed, instructional support, roughly about 74%. Administration makes up about 15%. And then the remainder, buildings, equipment, and debt service makes up about 11%. When we looked at making reductions, I split it up as best as I could based on how our expenditures come out of each area. And the reductions that I'm going to go over quickly here, this is what was presented at our last meeting with Todd here. In highlighted, we've updated it with the reductions, with our target being at 750. Whoops. This is where we're at. This is where we're projecting at the end of this year. FY25 preliminary, if we don't do anything, this is where we'll be at almost negative 300,000 in our unassigned fund balance, and that would put us over SOD. With the budget reductions, we're actually climbing out of the hole, and we'd have almost a $300,000 unassigned fund balance. It would be at about 4.12. It's not where we need to be with our unassigned fund balance, but it's the step in the right direction. So I'll start going through some of the reductions that we are proposing. I did in the board packet, there's a narrative that goes along with it. I'm not going to go through every piece of that. I'm trying to highlight it as best I can. But the total reductions for administration and support services is estimated at $210,000, or about 28% of the total $750,000 cuts that we're proposing. The first one is to reduce the superintendent position to 80%, which is a savings of $30,000, which includes reduction in salary and health insurance benefit. Absorbing the buildings and grounds supervisor position for FY25. I don't think that's a long-term solution, but for the next fiscal year, that's what I'm recommending. This savings would be around $60,000. Duties would be split between myself and several custodial and maintenance staff, and right now it's Kyle and Dale would be taking on some of those duties specific to his area. Realignment to pre-K, to a pre-K principal in combination of a dean of students with the AD community ed director. This would eliminate a full-time elementary dean. Estimated cost savings of this would be $50,000. We're absorbing an HR coordinator position, and that's effective this current year. It's on your on today's agenda. We had a partial resignation, so there's some savings there. And then we would eliminate the food service coordinator position and reassign those duties to the main office staff. And right now, the HR coordinator duties are being absorbed by Sheena in the business office. So that savings there with that position total would be $50,000. And then eliminating the IT help desk, which would be about $20,000. We've reduced that position this year down to 60%. And then we would eliminate it for next year. Total reductions, now I'm going to move on to more classroom-related reductions. And in this area, we're looking at about $250,000 of reductions, or about 33% of the total $750 in cuts. We have a science teacher resignation that we would absorb. Estimated cost savings would be $60,000. This will require reassignment of several teachers and combining a class of 24 into one section in the elementary. We just have tonight again special education teacher resignation. We would absorb that next year. And that would be about a cost savings of $45,000. This would give us, we'd be back to, as far as our SPED teachers numbers, we would be back to the same number we had in 2022 and 2023. The next one I have is the elimination of one of the school's social worker positions. Estimated cost savings of $70,000. I know that's going to be a controversial one with the mental health needs. In my narrative, I did address kind of the workloads for the high school and the elementary. I did talk about some of the programs that we are implementing or have implemented to address some of the needs. I think we can make it work. But I guess we're at the point where we can't, as a district, afford both of those positions, in my opinion. If we want to continue with those extra duties, we need to look at some grants or outside resources. And we have approached a few places. I just talked to Amy Ballard today, and she had some ideas on where we might want to look for some grants. I know the collaborative group, the STEDS group, are looking at a new grant to be written for next year. So looking at some of those resources to bring back some of those services. We're unique for school districts our size to have 2 full-time school social workers. Part of the funding that we've gotten from the county collaborative, and I went back and did some history. You know, our first school social worker was hired in 1997. We had 859 students back then. Several years later, we experienced declining enrollment. Some of you have been around here as long as I have. When Solvay was changing, we had some significant reductions. In fact, I got reduced or canned that year too. And they were looking at that position and felt it was important. So I think there were some outside resources that helped support that, keeping that position back then. In 2005, 2006, we added a second school social worker position, and this was primarily in the elementary. And this was under a grant, I believe it was through CHI, and may have been partially funded by the local collaborative as well. In 2006, 2007, we had 588 students. The account activity report for the Children and Families Collaborative, which is fiscally hosted by the county, they have payment information that goes back to 2007 that they sent me. Over the years, the total amount received has ranged from as low as $15,000 in 2007 to as high as $40,000. That's been fairly consistent for most of the years. In 2022, we received $31,000 for this, and for this year, we received $26,000. And Amy Ballard is involved with that, and we used to have yearly meetings. Now they're more done through emails. But it's always been something that we've always been kind of uncertain how long that funding will last and what it's going to look like year to year. So that's how we've helped offset some of the costs, but it has never offset the cost for 2 full-time positions, not even 1 full-time position. The last time we hired a school social worker was in 2012, 2013. We had 471 students. Our current enrollment, as I reported earlier today, is 429 students. So it's kind of the history behind it. In the elementary, there's 41 students that are getting services. In the high school, there's 28 students getting services. I listed in the narrative some of the other things we've done with SEL. We've added counseling service with children and through Northland, and we've also added children's therapeutic services and support position through Northland. We have a Help Me Stop It app that we just got a grant for. That's a reporting and access to crisis counselors. So there's a number of things that we've done to supplement the needs that we have with our students. They're doing calming kits. They did a grant for classroom teachers. Mary's had a couple different grants that she's written for different things through the Northwest Minnesota Foundation. So while it would be ideal to have 2 school social workers, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's something I want to get rid of, but we, like I said earlier, we are unique. We're a small rural school. To have 2 compared to other schools our size, it's very unique. Most of them struggle to find 1 school social worker. So I would be remiss if I didn't recommend that we reduce one of those positions based on our numbers and finances. Obviously, there's going to have to be some changes with programming, and we might have to prioritize what services would be available to kids. So as far as from looking at the general ed standpoint of it and our revenue, we can afford a school social worker. If we want to have a second school social worker, then down the road, that's what we need to start looking at, some grants or other ways to support an additional
So would you
full-time
ex-
position.
What would you expect, Jeff, is the level of funding that we would need to get in grants in order to preserve that second school?
I would say my recommendation would be whatever grants we get would determine the
No,
level of,
But I'm saying, yeah, the level of, but would we be looking for an entire $70,000 to preserve that second position?
if we want to preserve a full-time position.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So what I'm saying is any additional position would have to be fully funded
Yep.
at whatever level we can,
Right,
it might
and
take
that's-
several
yeah,
grants.
That
Yep.
was, I just wanted to see if I understood that correctly.
Paraprofessionals, we're looking at 3 positions. We currently have 2 paraprofessionals assigned to the school readiness classroom. We're looking at a cap to the student count, which would probably be around 15 students, which is the number of seats that we actually get funding from the state for. We've been running that program in a pretty significant deficit for quite a few years. So we're looking at making some adjustments there. This will allow us to reduce 1 para in that program. We're also planning on having only 1 paraprofessional in the media center, and Ms. Merchant is looking at scheduling throughout the day to ensure that the elementary can get their library time and that we're also meeting the needs of the high school. And we also had a one-on-one special ed student who has left the district. We do not anticipate that person coming back. We actually hired this year a paraprofessional specifically for that need. So that's one that we would eliminate for next year. Additional reductions, and this is everything that I haven't gone through yet, and that's kind of the not necessarily direct classroom, but that's about $290,000 total, or 39%. And one that, Matt talked about, the capital projects levy, and using subscription services. That's one of the things that we've gone through already to look at what do we need for subscription services and what can we live without. One is the frontline budgeting tool would be eliminated, and we've talked about that one before. That's a $10,000 savings. We have like teacher pay teacher subscription, Schoology in the elementary, AR and STAR testing. There's some SIPA filter that's obsolete that we can eliminate. There's a list of those, and they total about $35,900. Copier and paper usage, we've seen a jump in the last couple of years in that, and we're going to look for ways to at least cut about $25,000 in our paper and copier usage. Staff development, there's a 2% set aside that's mandated by the state. Unless you're an SOD, which I don't believe we will be, or by a vote by the teachers group, they can waive that, so we don't have to set aside that $60,000 roughly that has to be spent on staff development. We could leave it in the general fund and use it as needed. And then the last one is kind of a catch-all. It's reductions by department, about $169,000. And this would be reduce or deferred expenditures such as supplies, freeze on technology, and equipment purchases. They might include some programs such as some of our athletic activities. We might look at cutting down on the number of games or trips. And Sam and I have talked about a little bit about that, how we can slim that down a little bit, because that's one of our major expenses this last year was just in fuel cost alone. I've started an active list, and that's on this on that document that's in your board packet. Ed Plus, We're looking at if we can reduce or eliminate our additions of that. The last one that we sent out through the Northern Light region was $1,200. Usually each time we publish and print and mail out, it's about almost $1,500. So eliminating that. Jill's been talking about doing paperless accounts payable. We haven't put a dollar figure on that, but that's anything that's reducing our paper and copy would help. Mary's talked about attendance letters, immunization letters, going to more electronic email communication with parents and families. And for this spring, we're looking at possibly $1,000, and for the whole year next year, it'd be $3,000 to $5,000 in cuts as far as just sending out postage and that type of thing. Looking at reducing the number of district-owned cell phone lines, that's about a $2,000 savings. And then looking at, SMS has provided a proposal with some contract savings that I need to go through. And that's something that down the road, probably in March, we'll be looking at if we want to continue with this format or if we want to look at hiring our own business manager and what the pros and cons of that would be and if there's cost savings or not in either one. Gotta make sure I didn't miss anything. And I guess this is a living document. This is something that we'll be continuing to add and adjust as we move forward. Timeline for all of this. This board meeting is just to present the proposals. March dates to be determined as far as public input meetings. I would like us to nail down 1 or 2 dates and what the board would like to do for a format. In the past, we've done more informal listening sessions, I think we've called it in the past, where we set a time and certain board members to be in here and available to staff and the public to come in, and basically for the board to listen to their concerns and answer questions. That would be an option, or if you wanted to do a formal public input meeting. I think sometimes we're formal where you have to stand up here and it's recorded and people have to present. I think it deters some people from coming in and sharing their thoughts and ideas with the board. I guess that would be my only leaning towards more of some more informal sessions, but that's up to the board how they feel they want to take public input. And then at the March 25th board meeting is when I would like to formally act on the staff reductions. I think timeline-wise, when we do unrequested leave of absence, I think the April board meeting would be like the absolute deadline. But I would rather, if we're set on those reductions, make it happen in March and give those people chances to apply at other places. And so I would like to bring those to the March 25th meeting. Any questions on that so far?
You mentioned leave of absence.
So if it's more for tenured positions, you do an unrequested leave of absence, and it's a termination, but they have return rights basically up to a certain amount of time. If they're non-tenured, you terminate the position. They don't have any recall rights. So if it's a tenured teacher position and we let them go for financial reasons, if something changes and we add a position back, they would have rights to that position as long as they're licensed to it. So if there's not any questions, I'm going to move on to buildings and grounds. Update.
Question about how soon this listening session occurs. I mean, I didn't hear any specific dates in there.
Before we leave, I want to set some dates within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Depends on how many do you want to have, what's the format?
I'd recommend let's have an informal one to begin with, see how that goes, and if we needed another one, a formal one, or then
Yep.
address it at that time. Anyone, any other thoughts?
Well, the sooner the better. If we're going to consider two, we should have one within the next, I mean, I'll say a week, but we can look at 10 days or 12 days or whatever.
Yep.
But, we're looking at a March board meeting that is 4 weeks away, and if we got to put 2 meetings into that time frame.
So let's find a day during the week of March 4th through the 8th, pick a day.
I am available the 4th through the 6th. I am not available the 7th or 8th. That's okay, we have Rosita, Carla could take over.
Evening session?
Yeah, I would say like a
Evening.
4 to 6, or something
Well, if
to
we have
that.
that level of informality, it doesn't mean that somebody has to be in attendance at 4, and if they get off work at 5, they can show up and
Just
voice
pop
their
in
concern.
and,
Right.
yep, and
So
we
they're
can
not
come up
missing
with,
out.
if they have questions or things that the board can't answer, they can do it in writing and we can follow up down the road with it. Because I think at the last one I was not present for the listening sessions.
Monday?
You're saying Monday, the 4th week from today? I'm good with the whole week, I just find it.
Pick this one better.
Yeah. Woody, can you get that in the paper?
I can put it in the paper, but I won't be here.
No. We'll take notes for you.
I'll put it in the paper. Public meeting 4 to 6 p.m. Monday the 4th.
Yep.
I'll just have to talk to John. Yeah.
Okay, and I'll make sure that we get it,
Bus route covered.
Is that enough? Do you
Well-
want to do, or should we start later?
A little later. It would be a little later, it'd have to be like 5:36.
And not, if it's informal though, not all of you.
we don't,
True.
if we have, well, we're going to advertise, we'll advertise it as a listening session. You just have to be careful with public meeting laws that if you have a quorum, you got to be careful what you talk, and you can't make any decisions because it's not a formal public board meeting.
So
We're planning to.
Usually, I think in the past, we had 2 dates, and we had 3 board members at one, and the other 3 at the other one. Or if you can only come for an hour, I mean, it's, and the expectation is that we're writing down suggestions, questions, and sharing
Yeah,
them.
getting ideas about what we might have overlooked or what the public
Yeah.
thinks is a better idea.
And I'm assuming we want to just focus on the budget reductions. We have that whole thing with Seth and their facilities being, if a building can survive 60 years, we're halfway through the life of the building. And that's going to play a role too if we end up doing something in November, whether it's a bond or capital projects or
I could be at the
operating.
Monday meeting.
Yeah, I could be at the Monday meeting. I mean, whoever could be there is, I think, fine. Like you said, we're not going to be making decisions, so.
I'll be at the Monday meeting as well.
I will.
Okay.
Find more informed.
Okay, as long as you are careful what you talk about and don't make any decisions.
Just listen.
This announcement that I have to make will be actually the deadline for the paper, I believe is,
For a meeting.
yeah,
Right.
for a meeting. I'll have to check. I'll check with Julie on that.
Well,
Yeah, I don't think,
Yes.
it won't get in the paper. It won't get in the paper.
Noon today.
It had to be
No.
this week's paper. So I'll announce it, but
Does it have to be in the paper, or can we do like Facebook's, like what's the
that'd be the
legal?
smart thing to do, go electronic to Facebook.
Well,
I
don't know
would,
what's-
not everyone does Facebook, so I would say, I would recommend we do 2 dates, and if we want to do the first one on the 4th, and then schedule one the
Like
following
on the
week, where that, people that get a paper and don't do Facebook or social media would have that information.
Then do one on the 11th too?
Do one on the 11th, same time?
I mean, what does that look like for everybody?
So Carla, I will be gone.
Okay.
We're not doing the 11th.
So the 4th, and then the following Monday is the 11th.
Same time. 4 to
Yeah,
6.
does that work?
I'll have to talk to my boss.
Okay.
Oh, there's not? Perfect.
Oh, that's
Okay.
right, Teacher in Service Day.
I was also going to
That's
hold the
right.
spring sports meeting at 5 on the 11th, but I don't think it's a huge deal for those things to overlap. People can
No,
come for
they
an hour.
can do your meeting and then come in here and
Right.
talk to the board members.
Thank you.
Okay? Any other questions before I go into buildings and grounds?
I got one,
Okay.
Jeff. It's just kind of a curiosity question. With our low enrollment, and there's kids going to school over in Laurel, mostly for, they go there for hockey. How much do we have to pay them every year? We have to give more money that we're receiving from the state?
No, they get the state aid that the state sends out, so. And I didn't include this in this, but in the audit, and we can run enrollment reports. Right now, and I'm not gonna make up numbers because I don't know off the top of my head, it's pretty much balanced as far as the numbers of our resident students that go out and the number of students outside that are not residents that come in. So it does fluctuate from year to year, but I think in general, it's almost a wash. Some years we're getting more kids than what we're sending out, and some years it's the other way.
I've just heard some pretty big numbers that I didn't know if there was truth to it or not. Figured now it's maybe
What about kids that are homeschooled? Is that included in the number of kids you're saying that are going out? Or is that just another district?
No, we count them, but they don't generate any revenue for the school, nor do they generate any benefit financially at home. So parents choose to homeschool. They can come to the district if they want like some textbooks, if they want to use our textbooks that we provide. But we don't count them, so we don't lose them. Granted, if we had them, we'd have the extra revenue. But it's not necessarily a loss, because we
And
don't.
can those children participate in sports? and
Oh, yeah,
programs?
we've had them, sometimes they'll come in just for band, for example.
Right.
Or athletics, and I think anytime we can get them in for one thing might lead to more time.
And they pay the same amount as,
Yeah.
as our students do.
As if they were enrolled,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other questions? Buildings and grounds, the committee did meet, and it was Boyd, Lynn, myself, and Dale, and Kyle. And we went over the division of duties for the remainder of this year. We discussed the options for next year. I know I'm proposing that we not fill that position next year because it's a bigger cost savings for us. But if the board feels that that's a vital position that we want to fill sooner than later, we can make adjustments with the budget cuts. Long term, I don't know. I think if we give it the rest of this year and next year, we're meeting on a weekly basis. We talked about the board committee meeting on a monthly basis, just to make sure that things are running smoothly and we're staying on top of it. I know for a fact we can make it work this year and next year. Long term, that might be something that we want to consider once we get out of this hole. I have not advertised the position, and I know we talked about it at the meeting, but I can advertise for the position now. Doesn't mean we have to fill it in July. What are any strong feelings on, should we take the time to post it, or just move forward with what our plan is and post it after we get into next fiscal year?
What was this argument for posting it?
Well, you don't have to hire the person, and,
But there's a reason why he said to put it out, and darned if I can remember what it was.
He thought you would identify a pool of candidates that might be possible to add in a year even.
Okay.
So-
He said there are a lot of guys who are looking for that position in the maskless situation that might respond to something like that, and especially at the end of a school year, because it took so long to reorient themselves to Lake of the Woods County if they came from Rochester or something. You know, they wouldn't be able to leave their job in March to come up here, was his argument, as I remember. You had to get to the school year end.
It was something, it was slightly different than that, but
He was talking also about somebody wanted to retire up here.
Yeah.
We've come up with that position and
I guess my point is, if you're gonna advertise, then we should be considering the applicants, and if we have qualified applicants, then we should probably interview them, and if we interview them, if we identify someone, we should plan on hiring it. And if that's what you wanna do, we can do that, but that would be $60,000 absorbing a position. I'm gonna really stick with trying to push for the $750,000 cut for next year.
I guess I'd say stick with the plan for now.
Okay. I just feel that
As long
we
as
stick-
people are willing.
Well,
Step up and do that.
if we can advertise in a year from now
Yep.
and have plenty of applicants and time to get the word out and hire someone for FY '26, have them start July. So, next year is just crucial that we make these cuts and get our unassigned fund balance built up as quickly as can, so. And then the last thing, I thought,
We're going to talk about the weight room.
yeah, Kyle was gonna pop in here. Maybe he got busy with something.
I have that on my report too, so we could wait and see if he shows up by then.
Let's do that,
Okay.
because people are probably getting tired of listening to me talk, so. But you probably have more information than I do anyway, so we'll see if he comes, so. That's all I have, unless there's other questions, or,
Okay. I guess we'll, there's Principal Mary Merchant.
Good evening. Well, I have 2 weeks of pre-K-12 under my belt. I want to say it's going extremely well, so hopefully that's feedback you get from other people, but made a point that first week of individually going into the classrooms and saying hello to the kids, and met with the teachers that first week to really just say I'm glad to be here, and like I said, I think adjustments are going well and we'll continue to make those. I told them I'm not going to be making any major changes for the remainder of the year, and we'll just work the best we can together. Started out the beginning of February, snow days for all the students. We really just focused on dress-up days, no interruption to the classes during the day that week at all. Just a fun week to be a little silly, quite frankly. Our sixth graders were able to go skiing last Friday, and they had a wonderful time. I was able to catch them. I was here for the game when they came back, and despite not much snow on the ground, you know, when they can make snow and the temperatures cooperate, that's great. So, and everybody came home safe with no major injuries, so that was great. Want to acknowledge Jaleesa Mathias as our AAA award recognition person, and she went to Monoman for the banquet. That was just last week, wasn't it, Sam? I think it was. So nice for one of our students to be recognized in that capacity. On my report, and since it's getting so late, I'm not going to read everything, but I listed things that have been done for career in college. I guess the big one would be our students going to War Road. We were invited to join them for their career fair, and we had 15 students go to that. And Polaris has been here, and scholarship information continues to be sent out weekly. And then last week for the elementary PBIS activity, the students in 3 through 5 went skating, and the K through 2 students had some open gym time. Do you have any questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And business office, Sheena.
Okay, so first I will just touch base on where we are currently at in the school year with our expenditures and revenues. So currently our state revenues are at 45% received, federal revenues 85% received. Our remaining ESSER funds have been drawn. Our title dollars have been drawn through December 30th. So I go through and I look at what we've expended, and then I'm able to draw that amount of money from the state. Our property taxes are 48% received. Local revenues are 82% received. Food service, 45% received. Community education, 16% received. We just spent the remaining funds of our Farm to School First Bite grant. We just received $2,500 yesterday. Sorry, today, it's Monday. So that was our last $2,500, and we do not have any more funds remaining for that grant. For our expenditures, our salaries and wages are 47% expended. Employee benefits, 45% expended. Purchase services, 75% expended. Supplies, 60% expended. Equipment, 92% expended. Food service is 60% expended, and community education is 59% expended. Next, I will go over our revised budget. I did touch base on this at our meeting last month. I went through all the savings we have for this year and what the difference in what we initially projected versus now. And then I'm asking the board to approve our revised budget today also. Overall, our revenues did increase. We're projected to receive $274,821 more dollars. Overall, our state revenues are projected to increase slightly. Federal will also increase by about $50,000. Property taxes will go down about $30,000, and then local fees will go down $200,000, but basically the revenue just shifted from local to state. So just keep that in mind, it's just a shift in where the revenue is coming from. Local revenue includes fees, interest, and then levy dollars for our pool and arena. For our expenditures, we basically just went through and tightened a lot of things up. So our capital expenditures, we basically just put a freeze on. And then we're just going to shift a lot of our expenses to capital to try spend on that fund balance. So our salaries and wages increased by $208,298. Employee benefits have went down considerably in our projection. That was due to last year, we were paying benefits for people that were no longer employed. I caught that several months after I started, when I was cleaning up just some enrollment things and, just balancing our bills based on who was actually employed, and then going through that, and then we did write off that debt this last fiscal year. Purchase services, our expenditures should go down $36,000. Supplies are going up $74,522 based on what was initially projected. Equipment will go down $138,927. That's basically due to us putting a freeze on a lot of things for the end of the school year. And our other expenditures will go up $174,447, but that's basically just has to do with our pool and just shifting those expenditures. So after reviewing the budget, and then different cost savings that occurred throughout the year that we didn't initially project or plan for, I'll just go through those one by one. We had a resignation for a kindergarten teacher and then a replacement. That was a reduction or savings of $29,300. Resignation of a VPK teacher, a reduction of $46,600. A reduction in health insurance by an administrator, $9,350. Resignation of maintenance super and ground supervisor, $18,770. Reduction of an IT position, $8,000. Reduction of a custodial bus position that was initially budgeted, $40,000. And by putting a hold on all capital purchases for the remainder of the year, we budgeted $320,228. We are now budgeting $83,596. But then we'll be moving current expenditures to capital, just so we spend down that fund balance, so it helps our unassigned. We also have a good LTFM fund balance. We're going to move different expenditures to LTFM, again, to bring down that fund balance, and then again, just help out our unassigned fund balance. Any questions on the revised budget?
I have a question that refers back to the Ellers, the discussion of the hockey rink levy, the lease levy there. He talked about that and the $68,000, which has been the number, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years. So you have an available $24,644. He didn't touch on that, but isn't the pool under the same umbrella? I thought that they were both sort of intertwined. You had one and the other.
No. They're two different levies.
The pool you can tax.
Pool levy,
It has its own tax
Yeah,
thing. It's on its own. Because
that's my understanding.
Yeah.
So,
But isn't it under the same levy sort of construction that the hockey rink is in terms of our ability to levy the local tax base to a certain amount?
It is
Kind of,
different.
sort of.
I submit expenditures to the state for both of them, but they are,
Like under different state.
pool levy comes through our gen ed.
they're
funding,
community ed.
And that's where we do the transfer. The lease levy is not included in that.
So the difference is, like, the pool, we own it, the arena, we don't. So basically, I'm taking the bill that we
Okay,
receive.
that makes sense, yep, now you
Yep,
say
so
that.
that's the difference between the leases.
So the $25,000 that's left on the lease levy goes to, we don't have an opportunity to use that up, right? I mean, the levy capacity is 92,000.
I'm gonna have to double check on that, because what happened was, going through our levy certification report, one of my coworkers indicated that we weren't using the correct UFARS code for the arena levy. So when we're submitting our data at the end of the year, it was basically showing we didn't have an expenditure. So then we weren't getting all the funds available the last several years. So for FY 2023, I set up a new code. I coded the $68,000 there, it's submitted to the state, and now it's actually showing up on a report that we're getting all the money. So in prior years, we were not getting all the money.
Okay, so we're getting it all, what are we doing with the rest of it? I mean,
We're getting the 68.
We're getting
Oh.
68,000. So there was, like 2 years ago, we only got $29,000.
Some of that is in-kind
But
expenditures too. So the 68 actually covers our lease payment.
Yeah.
There's certain additional
like custodial
custodial,
fees.
formal, there's additional in-kind things within the contract that gives us that 90-some thousand.
I think the refs and stuff too, is that?
I'd have to-
No.
Contract that we set up with the arena originally, so the 68 is actual dollars, and then like you said, the in-kind is personnel, it's posting, I think some of it's the mowing, some of it's the shoveling.
It's like
The snow
the
removal.
maintenance around the
Yeah,
building.
Removal, and so it's work that the school does for the school, for the arena, based on its now proximity, and that was initially, that was set up at the building of the new facility.
And I think
we
there's
can
a
get a copy of
formula
that
goes with
contract
that.
from the arena.
yeah, I've got it somewhere at
Yeah.
home too.
Yeah.
Another discussion. Okay,
Oh, so the overall revised budget, we're projecting a deficit of $41,168. We wouldn't have gotten to that point unless we made some cuts during the year. And we did tighten a lot of areas up. We basically said no more supplies that were unnecessary. So we're just really watching those expenses. Every month supervisors get their expenditure report to review and their fund balance. You know, we get a forest fund balance report. So I'm sending those out monthly once month end is completed prior to the school board meeting. So. Okay, and the next item I am asking the board to approve tonight is which I must have left it over there. It was just basically an expenditure that was coded wrong a few years ago to the class of 2028, and I want to shift that expenditure to Fund 1, so it will be the school district's responsibility to basically just forgive and absorb. So the amount is $2,767.49. After reviewing it, we found it was an expenditure actually for the class of 2021 or 2022. There was multiple fundraisers with this organization that year, and we believe the expenditure was just coded wrong. And I did seek information from AAA, and they couldn't find anything, and then we couldn't find anything here. I did reach out with different advisors from all the classes, and that's pretty much what it came down to. And we wanted to wait until our audit was presented and completed before we made this move, just in case they had a different recommendation. So this will occur in this fiscal year. Last fiscal year, we did take care of a lot of other items with the student activity accounts once we got it cleaned up and back to where it should be.
okay.
Okay. Oh, yes. Oh, I'll go over that next. Okay. Also, the state mandated that employees accrue ESST, which is Earned Safe and Sick Leave. For all our employees, we are actually offering enough safe or sick leave time to meet the requirements. So we are good there, but anyone who subs now gets ESST time accrued. So on everyone's pay stub, it shows their time, and then they're able to even request it in the time off system, payroll system. So we are set up there. I did find out from a few of my coworkers that we do not need to give leave time to coaches. I was told by Region 1 that we needed to, but after doing research and talking with a few other regions, and I think we actually heard that from like the superintendent organization too. We had some language on it, but what I was told was when you're coaching, you get a stipend. So technically, that it doesn't necessarily go towards hours of work, so they do not accrue ESST time. So everyone should have their time showing up on their pay stub, and it'll continue to accrue after I process each payroll. And then once this fiscal year is over, I have to take everyone's leave time and basically give it a new name, so it actually says ESST. But right now, we're in compliance with the state. So, next, I will go over our audit proposal. Last year, Ide Bailey indicated they would not be providing auditing services to us anymore. So we did put together a RFP, and I sent to many firms throughout the state. I want to say it was at least 10, and we only received one quote back, and that was Bergen KDV. So I included on our comparison proposal of audited services what Bergen KDV has quoted us for the next couple years, just because we did have a 3-year contract. I received one quote on Friday, so I apologize this information is late, but I was out of town Friday and didn't have my computer, and I just happened to receive it on Friday, which was the deadline. So Brady Martz sent us a quote, and it is attached, and they provided rates for actually 4 years. I asked for 3 years, and I just did a comparison on different services, and then I'll just go into just my experience of working with both firms. Bergen KDV provided a fully remote audit. They were not on site this past year. Brady Martz indicated that for the first year, just since we're new, they want to get to know us more, and they will do a combination of remote and on-site audit. Nancy Schultzenberg was the manager and CPA that oversaw our school, and we were assigned 3 fieldwork associates. She indicated that would continue in the future. In Brady Martz's proposal, Sarah Niemela would be the manager assigned to our school. She has been a CPA for 12 years. Amanda Skansen will be basically the main CPA assigned to our school, and she has worked with Brady Martz for 14 years. And then 2 additional fieldwork associates would be assigned to the school. I have worked with Sarah Niemela for, 7 years at the Badger School, and Amanda Skansen I did for 1 year for sure. She was one of the fieldwork associates, not the CPA assigned, but she was very thorough and good to work with. I asked each firm to provide a response form, and that is included on page 25 of the Bergen KDV proposal, and then page 29 of the Brady Martz proposal. One thing to point out that Brady Martz has basically quoted $4,000 more between the 2 proposals. So I know that's a concern, and it's something to think about. After completing this first audit with Bergen KDV, I just wanted to touch base on a few things. Prior to audit, it was indicated that Bergen KDV would be subcontracting creative planning to complete our audit. We were not notified of this. Creative planning was located in Nebraska, and I only received notice of who our actual auditor was just a few weeks prior to audit. I did not receive audit portal access to our audit until a few days prior, which left me very little time to prepare and upload anything that they needed. Bergen KDV did not reach out to Eide Bailey for our past audit information until several weeks after our audit. So our audit was beginning of August. They should have had all that information done prior. Normally a consent form is filled out, or they put together a consent form, they send it to me to sign and approve the release of the documents. That was never sent to me till 3-4 weeks after our audit. Bergen KDV does not use smart systems, so when I set them up for access to our payroll software or our accounting software, they did not even enter our software once. So I found myself constantly sending them information over and over and over and running different reports when most firms just jump in and do what they need, or if they have a question, or they'll tell me to look something up. It just really made things take a lot longer than it really should have. 2 of the auditors assigned to our school quit, and we were not notified of it, so the communication just really didn't happen. And then several weeks I would email and not hear anything back, and then I was notified that 2 of them had quit.
I can maybe help you out here. The Finance Committee recommends going with, what was their name?
Brady.
Brady.
Oh.
KDV.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch base on the last one because it was actually really,
Okay.
really good.
Yeah, that is a pretty
So
spectacular.
here's our final audit report. And so then Nancy presented at our last meeting. And she brought up a finding that I was not notified about, and I was like, what? So the last audit we had, there were many, many findings. Like, we had a lot of things that we needed to work on. There was a lot of concerns. I kind of jumped into a mess. Well, this audit, we had one finding, which every school district our size gets, and that is segregation of duties. Just because I do most of the work. So at our meeting, she brought up a finding of improper coding, which I was not told about ahead of time, and also late submission. Well, the late submission was due to Bergen KDV taking 4 or 5 months to complete our audit. But when you look at the very end of the audit, it is for the Hinckley School District. So the Hinckley School District's final findings were thrown into our book. So we did not have any findings, and so it was, personally, it was great. We did a great job. So financially, not so, but as far as everyone doing their job at the school, it's happening. So I recommend Brady Martz. I've worked with them for 7 years. They're awesome. Whenever I have questions, I would call them and ask them just for their professional opinion, because that's what we pay them for. They've always been professional, friendly, given me advice, and to me, going through an audit is a way to improve, learn from it, and it's their job to come in and find things, essentially. But they are very experienced with smart systems. They'll jump in, and in Badger, in 3 days, they will give us our financials. Like, hey, this is where you're sitting at within 3 days, and it took 4 months for Bergen KDV. So my recommendation is Brady Martz. I understand the dollar amount difference, but I truly believe we are paying for great service, and they will even come on site for a day, and I feel like you can get so much work done in a day. It's just great, and it's worth it. So, and during audit, I usually stay in town for the week, so I prefer getting it done and doing a good job. Any questions?
Quick question, Sheena.
Yeah.
When you were mentioning the budget that you're going to be submitting here tonight, do you have a dollar figure for that budget that I can quote?
Yep, the projected deficit.
Yeah, I saw the projected deficit. Is there a dollar figure for the whole budget?
Yes, here, I'll give it to you right now. Okay, revenue, $9,339,194. Expenditures, $9,380,362.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like throwing those big figures around.
Yeah.
Didn't we have Brady Mart's?
Years ago, yep. In fact, I remember working with Sarah and Tracy, can't remember her last name,
Bergman.
Bergman
Yeah,
was the lead.
not too long ago. I mean,
Prior
I believe
to
prior to
Ide
Bailey. So
5 years, 6 years?
4 or 5 years ago, I
Yeah.
would say.
And why did we leave them then? Just got a different bid, better bid? I mean, we went the money route?
Yeah, there's a number of things I'd have to go back and look.
And why did they entertain our ask for business or ask for their efforts this time? Because a year ago, they said no.
Last year, so last year they said they were already had too many schools and they had a schedule, which I actually really appreciate, because if Bergen KDV couldn't handle us, I really wish they wouldn't have. I mean, obviously, we needed them, but if you can't provide the work, I mean, that's a huge concern. But at least Brady Martz is saying, yes, we can accommodate you. I've worked with them for 7 years, so I was like, hey.
I mean, I assume we've already paid off Bergen KDV for their efforts, but I
Oh,
almost
yes.
feel like we just didn't get our dollars worth out of that. I don't know how you contend that or contest that, but it's just frustrating.
Well, I'm gonna request.
For me, I felt like it was a lot of extra work for me
Request
for
what?
many, many months.
I
Like,
think we should get replacement booklets with the right district.
I was thinking we just go to the other school district and listen to their presentation, and we'd be
can we just
fine.
swap out the last 2 pages?
So I know we're making budget cuts and that it's a, what, $4,000 increase. But as I alluded to, we count on the auditors to do their job, and that's how we check, that's our checks and balances when we're budgeting. And if we can't get accurate information in a timely manner, then that really makes it hard for us to do what we need to do with budgeting. So I would concur with her recommendation.
I mean, in Badger, I would always be audited in August, and I would have my final report by September, October by the latest, and they would present in October.
Would everyone be okay with putting that on the agenda? Are we comfortable with voting for them tonight?
Yeah, I think that's business done. I just
Yep.
frustrated, isn't there a state oversight of these auditors? I mean, isn't somebody have to say, okay, you know how to do school finance, we're gonna let you sell yourself to, or I mean, could Tim Lyon show up and say, I'll do the audit for Lake of the Woods? I mean, it's,
I'll give it a shot.
yeah, I mean, what the heck for
Credentials.
$50?
I mean, I take all our audited data and submit it to the state, and it has to be error-free, I guess, but
But the auditors
they are
are,
credited,
they are accredited by the state.
yes.
Okay. So, I mean, is that something we report? I mean, this is it's comical stuff, but it's also wrong stuff. You know, the drag out is the one I just keep remembering. I mean, from November to December, we're going through this knowing financially that we're, okay, and not getting numbers to make those decisions, you know? Now we're sitting here in February trying to make decisions that maybe we could have made 3 months ago. And should have been able to make 8 months ago, I mean, if things have been done in a more timely fashion.
Could I comment on that?
Yeah,
I guess what I think is the state already knows because everything was submitted to them multiple times
okay.
with changes. So they're aware of the issues that we had with the delays.
Okay.
Would you say that's accurate?
Yep, and I had to write a letter to the state stating why. And I think
Why
my
it was
question
late.
was why the auditors didn't need to do that, but
Well, 2 weeks ago, she emailed
I
Karen
emailed
about
Nancy. I haven't
this in
heard
the
back.
back of the book, and we still haven't got a reply, so. So, we have an engagement letter, is that what we're approving tonight? Engagement letter with, correct?
Brady Martz?
Brady Martz.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you will send a notification to KDB, Bergen KDB,
Yes.
that we're not going to use them.
They shouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't think so.
And now it's soon enough for them to pick up another school if they need to.
I would wait a month then.
It got lost in the mail,
Okay.
so, all right,
thanks.
thank you. I think we're athletic, activities, community ed.
So I'll start with the weight I'll wait till I get here. I'll start with the weight room thing, because I know Kyle just walked in, and so I don't know if you want to come up and talk about it, or? Yeah, come on up. So I'd say go for it, and I'll just fill in where you... Well, I think you're the... So Kyle has been a really great part of the weight room over the course of the last 18 months to 2 years. Is that accurate in terms of time? Sure. And so he and I have been working on, he's been doing some supervising in the weight room for students who are either outside of athletics or in athletics. And so he and I have been kind of brainstorming over the course of this chunk of time, how do we make this weight room more accessible, not only for our students, but for the general public? Often that's equipment. Tony Browse is excited in the background. But that equipment obviously is money which we do not have. So Seth Putz got an email through Masmus, which is, I'm not really sure what it is, but...
It's a collection of other schools that, I guess when things like this arrive up, hey, we're donating free equipment. In this case, it was free. So we all jumped on it as fast as we could. We got some pretty good equipment out of it, saved ourselves some money. So you have to pop your head in the weight room, check it out. Some new ellipticals, new treadmills, and if you're strong enough, 50-pound up to 110-pound dumbbells. Not for everybody, but better than what we had. Also, the new benches in there, just safer for the students to use. The ones that we had were repaired numbers of times, just kind of getting by. So there was some much needed things that got replaced. So it was a good thing.
Awesome.
Free.
Yeah, free. And so this list that I have on my report, and I think what Jeff submitted, Kyle did research to put those numbers together, which I'm glad he's here because he's the kind of expertise behind this, right? Like the weight room is good, right? I should know more about it as the athletic director, but I'm appreciative of expertise, both in him and in Beef, to know what are the specifics, what are the machines that we need. So we literally got these pictures in this email and kind of circled the pictures and said, what do we want? And then I start kind of scurrying around to the various powers that be, Jeff and Mary, and say, can we go get this stuff? So Sauk Rapids, that's where they went. Sauk Rapids said, yes, we'll hold on to it for 24 hours if you can get here. And so Jeff and Mary said yes. So Chuck Merchant, Kyle, I think Mary voluntold Chuck, Chuck Merchant, Kyle Avendrop, Dale, and Seth all went down to get this stuff in 2 Suburbans and 2 covered trailers. So I was a little bit of an organizer, but not the legwork on this because, and there's a lot of thank yous to go out because this is a huge dollar amount, for those who don't have this in front of them, over $10,000 worth of used equipment. That's the other thing, is all of these totals are used. If we were to buy this equipment new, I think we'd probably 3 times that?
Yeah, I don't have the number, but it's
No.
more than that.
Right, and it's in really good shape. I mean, the more buff folks in the room can tell you. And so looking forward from this point on, it not only is a great addition for our current weight room users, but it does allow me to do more advertising in the broader community about opening that up. We now have treadmills, ellipticals, more community-based access. So a big thank you to all of those who were involved to make that happen.
Here, before you let
Yes.
Kyle off the hook that quickly, do you notice that? I mean, do kids show a renewed interest in stuff that's new? I'm not a weight room person, but does a kid go, wow, this is new and better and I'm going to come in more often? Do you see that kind of I mean, you've had it in there, what now, 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's still too early to tell with the new equipment, but, I mean, there's been some new people in there kind of making an effort. There's also been, can't remember the names off their head, asking me for workouts, showing some new interest to get in there and actually make an effort. I'm not going to say that this is what turned the tide, but yeah, having new stuff in there to lift is definitely a good place to start.
Right, and then you get into kids like in a football program, I would assume that you can sort of encourage them a little more easily when you've got something like that that's a little And you got somebody in there who's doing it, I appreciate that as much as you going down to St. Cloud to get it, or whatever. Just the fact that you're willing to stick your head in there and show Tim, for instance, okay, this is what you should be doing, how to work the
Tim,
equipment.
I can attest to, I know several students have approached Mr. Sather, and I had some stuff in the office, so I know, like when Sam says she wants to find ways that that room can be open more, I think if that was possible, it would get utilized more.
Yeah. I'm scheming a little bit on a new weight room policy that I won't get to till this summer, but how do we make it accessible for students more regularly? And that has to include liability concerns and supervision and all of that, but I think there's a way to do that so that it's doable. I also think this isn't, to your point, this isn't the stuff that maybe attracts an 18-year-old who's looking to get buff, but it does alleviate the cost pressure of finding other stuff that we need, right? We now don't have to spend money on 2 treadmills, 2 ellipticals, and a pedal bike as the cardio, but we can spend money on a new dumbbell set, which, yes, we've gotten some 50-pound to 110-pound, but that's not the majority of the dumbbells that are going to be used. So our next big purchase, I think, at this point is probably a new set of dumbbells that are rubber, they're safer, the ones we have in there are so old. They were used when that weight room opened when I was in school. My point about this is that this alleviates the pressure of all of the rest of equipment and allows us to focus on the stuff that does need safety. The other one is the flooring in there needs to be addressed also. So it's exciting. It's an exciting deal. I only have 2 other things. A pool update. You've heard a lot from me on the pool. I am excited to come kind of full circle to say that some of the changes we've made have improved pool attendance. So there were 2 days within January where we had 80 plus swimmers on a single day at an open swim event. And then on average, it's about 50 swimmers any other open swim day. Those are just Tuesday, Fridays, and Saturdays for about 4 hours. Monday, water exercise is getting a regular 18 to 22 ladies, and then Wednesdays and Fridays is about 15. So those are regular attendees of activities, and then there are about 2 to 3 birthday parties every week. So this post-COVID attempts we've been making to make sure that the pool stays open and accessible are working. Part of that is also that we've had our first 2 pool safety attendant positions. They're the 18 plus who can be supervisors, but they're not lifeguards, in Julie Newmiller and Emily Tangy. That's been a really good hole to plug there. The other one is money related, and I just want to point out, we get a cut every year as what's called a mileage reimbursement from Region 8. So if you were at the hockey game last Tuesday against Bagley, where we had a ton of people in the building, we had gate receipts of over $2,600, and you said, wow, this is going to be a great moneymaker for the school. All of that goes to the region, which is a real bummer, right? But because it's a playoff game, it's a section game, that money goes to the section. However, that money gets put into a big coffer. The region makes sure they pay all of their expenses, refs, whatever, gate fees, things like that. And then they take the excess and divide it amongst all the region schools based on how many miles you traveled for playoffs that year prior. So the benefits of living north of the middle of nowhere are few and far between, but one of them is resulting in an over $8,000 check that we received back from the region in excess mileage funds. So that's calculations I do at the end of every year. We just deposited that, I think, like I said, over $8,000. So if you hear people complaining about, oh, we don't get any of that money, the region is good about dividing that up in a way that we get a good kickback and compensated for the travel we have to do. Any questions? Great. You're all champions. We're going to make it, I promise.
Food service?
So I think it was just information in the board packet about the part-time position hire, welcoming in Allison. So that was kind of a budget reduction because we had been one full-time person short and we were able to find a half-time person. So we got to do it, so.
Okay, transportation?
I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm losing my voice, so. I just want to go over the fleet mileage. Is this on? Yeah, it is.
Yep. You're good.
Our total bus mileage, which we have 15 buses, we're right at about 1.4 million miles. And our average bus mileage is around 92,000. Now, to put in that perspective, World's at 114,000, so we're a little less than them, so I'd say we're a little better shape. We have our 3 oldest buses, we're at about 160,000 miles, and we figure we can live through about another 2 years, so we're figuring fiscal year 2027, we're going to have to be looking at some new buses eventually. But hopefully we can get through the next couple of years. Just put in perspective, last year we put on 172,000 miles on just the school buses last year. Our suburban mileages on average is 65,000, so we're sitting really good on our Type 3 vehicles. I think that's all I got. Any questions on the mileage? Going forward?
Nope, on mileage.
Yep. Thank you. I don't know if we get really.
Do you have Keith's phone number?
Yes, I do.
Good.
You know, a year ago today, you were snow blowing the track.
Is that a year ago?
Yes.
That was
Oh,
like
jeez.
5 feet deep.
And you might be tomorrow. No.
Serious.
All right, well, citizens forum, did we get any, I think everybody left. Or, no, a couple. Did we have any questions?
I didn't get anything
Okay,
turned into me, no.
since it's relatively relaxed, anybody got any questions while you're here? Okay, going once, going twice. Anything else from anyone? We'll adjourn the working session, and while you guys figure out the wording for the addition.
Oh, we need a statement for absorbing the IB, or the Brady Marks contract. Simple and it says it, perfect. Okay. One of my concerns about the public meeting being that casual, or that 2 hours, filter in, filter out kind of a mentality. No, I'm not sure it's bad. I don't